Retribution by Kelsey Miller. Prologue. Many stories of Earth have been told, of how it evolved from new to old. As the stories go, they say that during the first change from night to day, the Earth was split neatly in two. The reason then, no one knew. But soon that reason would be revealed. The mortals needed an immortal shield, one that would never tire, never fold, and never fail to keep them in its hold. For protection from a presence great, which was filled with such awful hate, that it threatened to topple man from predator to prey, even though it was only the beginning of the day. Because of this, the shield was formed. To guard the day, there was light, and darkness there for every night. Man would never again have to fear for their lives that seemed so dear. However, the shield was never whole, and eventually ripped into a gaping hole, because the light and dark were immortal foes, forever locked in epic battle woes. Soon the shield was not protection, there was hate and never affection. The present sought to take advantage, but could never quite seem to manage, because fate had decided to intervene. The shield, it forcefully came between. Fate reunited the broken shield to wipe the presence from the battlefield. And so the threat for man had passed, the danger with it left just as fast. Then fate left with one final warning, to never fight with man knowing the truth about the light and dark. And through the millennia man evolved. It seemed the problem had been solved. But the former shield did not heed fate's just and selfless deed. They continued their never-ending battle and killed each other like slaughtered cattle. Fate came once more, like it was an annoying chore, and banished the broken shield to the shadows of the earth not known by their mortal fellows, where no human could actually see what the earth might truly be. Even now they continue to fight, which they do with all their might. And when fate shall finally choose, who will win, who will lose? Chapter 1. Run! The command coursed through Phelan's mind. The chance to fight, to defeat, was over. He must flee. Phelan knew that running was his only chance of survival, but the fact of the matter remained. How was he going to do that? A foot rammed into his stomach, squashing the air from his lungs. Phelan snarled, whirling around to snap at his attacker's throat, infuriated when the man leaped nimbly away. There were two of them, adversaries that should have posed no threat to Phelan, but as the second creature jumped onto his back, he had no choice but to acknowledge that these two were different. Giving up on his first opponent for a moment, Phelan turned his attention to the one on his back, rolling across the ground in an attempt to dislodge the changeling, whose chokehold instantly loosened when Phelan's immense body crushed him into the ground. Using the momentary advantage, Phelan sprang away, pivoting until he had both in his sight. For an instant, Phelan simply stared at them, unable to believe that they were, in fact, changelings. But the fact was undeniable. The violet eyes and pale skin commanded him to acknowledge the truth. Normally, Phelan would have been unaffected by this information, but as he watched those calm, almost civilized eyes watching him, so unlike what they should be, he knew that he had to flee. Phelan snarled viciously. God, he hated vampires, and he hated that there was nothing he could do about these two even more. Slowly, he backed from them, his eyes never flicking away. Retreating 10 feet, Phelan stared when neither of them followed. Instead, they merely watched, their strange eyes glinting at him. Before either could attack, Phelan whirled and dashed away, weaving quickly through the trees. Phelan swore under his breath, furious that he had been unable to subdue the two changelings. He racked his mind for a reason, any reason, why the changelings had behaved so strangely. But he couldn't figure out why, at this very moment, the two neither chased him nor seemed as if they had had any intention of harming him in the first place. He threw a glance over his massive shoulder, frantically searching for any sign of them, unnerved when he realized that he was alone. Phelan slowed to a walk, suddenly uncertain if the two vampires had actually been changelings. But their physical appearances were undeniable, and a flicker of fear coursed through him as he wondered how they had been so controlled. Phelan knew the news meant a report to his father. He figured Kenrick would surely be irritated with him at his failure to execute the changelings. But the probable confrontation was not enough to keep him from returning home. He knew it was foolish to be outside at night. Phelan shifted when he reached the edges of the houses. Strong, powerful bones compacted as they morphed into the human skeleton. A thick wolf coat disappeared and was replaced with a mop of curly blonde hair, the tail vanishing last. He hurriedly changed into the clothes that he had left before he shifted, not wanting anyone to wander by and accidentally see him naked, despite the fact that the wolves were used to any sight of nudity. Phelan still found it embarrassing when someone caught him. The smells of his mother's cooking wafted outside as Phelan climbed the stone steps to the door. Hoping to use the meal as a distraction, he crept toward the kitchen, trying to make his steps fall as quietly on the floor as possible. Phelan? Phelan sighed and turned away from the sanctuary of the kitchen and slumped across the hall into his father's study. So, how did it go? Have they been destroyed? Phelan averted his eyes and avoided the question. He hated disappointing his father. He stayed silent because the man tended not to take bad news well, even though he wasn't sure if the strange changelings were bad news. Phelan wanted to avoid being on the receiving end of one of his father's discussions, which were usually very loud and never very happy. Well, I am waiting, you know. His father practically stomped his foot with impatience. Knowing better than to ignore the question and irritate him further, Phelan sighed again. Actually, no, they haven't been destroyed. There were a few, complications, he replied in a rush, wanting to get the words out so that the conversation would be over sooner. There were a few complications? What do you mean? Phelan winced, but then sudden anger slid over him and he spat, "Well, sir, I suppose it was because these two had never had any intention of killing me. No, that probably wasn't it. That isn't strange for a vampire at all. Maybe it was because they could resist my blood? You're right. That's probably not it either. And it couldn't have been the fact that they didn't even try to kill me. Oh, wait. I bet it was the fact that they were changelings." Phelan smirked at the surprise that flashed across his father's face. "Changelings? Are you sure?" Phelan rolled his eyes. "Jesus, Dad, don't you think I can tell the difference between the two? Yes, I'm sure." Kenrick's eyes narrowed slightly. "Fine. I never doubted your competence. I just merely wished it wasn't true. I believe we have a serious problem on our hands." Phelan nodded. "Perhaps we should send Cairn and Kaelin out tomorrow to search the surrounding area for them?" "Probably. The meeting will have to be moved up to tonight." Kenrick sighed and rose from his chair, clasping Phelan on the shoulder. For one brief moment, Phelan saw his true father, the father he had been before their problems with the vampires. Phelan marveled at how the increase in attacks had changed everyone in the family. "So it'll be after dinner, then?" "Yes. Immediacy seems like the best course of action for now." Phelan followed his father into the kitchen. Despite the fact that Phelan could sometimes barely tolerate his father recently, he still hated disappointing him, and knew Kenrick was only trying to keep the family safe. Phelan was so absorbed in his thoughts that he barely noticed when Brina slapped his plate on the table. "Do you want help, Mom?" Brina glanced at him before dishing out his food. "No, I'm fine, Phelan. Eat your food before it gets cold." Phelan shrugged and sat next to Fyodor, ignoring the barrage of questions hurled at him by his younger brother. Instead, he concentrated on his food, waiting for his father to speak. Phelan was hardly surprised when Kenrick stood a few moments later. "Brina, thank you for dinner, but it will have to be cut short. The meeting has been moved to tonight. I must prepare." Confusion washed over her face. "But I thought the meeting was next week." "It was, but Phelan has just told me some news that I feel must be shared with the family immediately." "It's late, though. Can't it wait until tomorrow?" "No, it cannot." Brina must have realized that arguing would be pointless, for she made no reply. Phelan took this as an opportunity to finish his food and escape out of the kitchen. After he placed his dishes on the sink, He grabbed his shoes and coat, tugging them outside while he waited for his father. As he looked out over the houses and surrounding landscape, Phelan saw no trace of the starlight that had formerly hovered in the sky. Phelan gazed into the shadows, refusing to acknowledge Kenrick even when the man cleared his throat. Fighting the temptation to stay home and just skip the meeting, Phelan followed his father into the woods. While they walked past the houses and curtainless windows, both men felt the eyes of the other wolves. Before long, Phelan knew the entire family would know of the meeting, but why couldn't his father just call everyone? Phelan sighed when his father broke the silence. As much as I hate to change the meeting, I feel I have to. Of course you do, Phelan said harshly. His father regarded him. Is there something wrong? Phelan met his challenge with a cool glare. You damn well know there is, and you understand the problem. His father looked at him, his expression unreadable. This discussion isn't over. Whatever, said Phelan in disgust. Arriving at the clearing, Phelan stalked off to the other side to wait for the meeting to begin. The clearing was neither small nor spacious, and rectangular in shape. Tall trees surrounded it on all four sides that curved slightly inward at the tops, but did not completely obscure the view of the dark sky or the dusting of stars that faintly flickered across it. At the corner of the clearing, the entrance wound through the woods from the houses. The grass was slightly long, and it curled around the ankles of the wolves. Phelan had missed the few people who had already gathered in the clearing while he was avoiding his father. He quickly scanned the faces that were present, among them his best friends, Karen and Kaylin. What's this about? Phelan smiled at their obvious confusion. When I was out tonight, I ran into a couple of changelings. Changelings? That's why we're here? They're hardly difficult to take down, Feo, snorted Karen, the older and larger of the two brothers. Phelan grimaced. Yeah, well, normally they would be, but these were different. Different? How so? Said Kaylin. I'm not sure if I should tell you. My father probably wants to, Phelan said, nodding toward Kenrick. When everyone had gathered in the clearing, Phelan's father stepped back from the group of people he had previously been talking to, and an immediate silence fell over the wolves. Kenrick said nothing at first, but paused to gather his thoughts. Finally, he said, Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry to uproot you from your homes tonight, when there's a meeting next week, but my son has just shared news that I feel you all should know. I'm going to get right to the point. When Phelan was out tonight, he encountered two changelings. Yes, I know what you are thinking, but these were unusual. As we know, all changelings are uncontrollable and are completely unable to resist blood of any kind. This makes them simple to destroy because they are easily distracted. They seek to kill anything that they come across because of this incapability of self-constraint. The two changelings Phelan fought today were not like that. In fact, they were able to resist the scent of Phelan's blood, allowing them to attack precisely and potentially fatally had Phelan not escaped. As if this were not enough, when Phelan did manage to escape, they did not try to pursue him. He said it felt like they had a motive for fighting him, one that was not for their usual thirst for blood. The silence left by Kenrick's speech lasted only a few moments. Soon there was a chorus of agitated and puzzled voices warping together until no one voice was intelligible. Phelan's father listened only for a few moments before calling order. Raising his hands, silence again fell among the wolves. I just heard a really good question. Phelan, can you describe these changelings? Are you sure that they really were changelings and not actually adult vampires? Phelan twitched, irritated that his father was skeptical, even if it was only for show.